Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to that blockbuster new release wall of your memory, grab a copy off the shelf, pop it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it. But probably more accurately, what time has done to us. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Minasan konnichiwa.
Very nice. And we're here to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane. So, Mike, I was talking to some people about our intro, and I actually got a little bit of feedback. They said they kind of sets the tone for the show. I think that's totally by accident. But I was starting to think about Blockbuster and how much I think indirectly it's contributed to this show. You remember the competition on Fridays and Saturday nights when you go to Blockbuster and you go back to the back of the wall on that store there, and I don't know, for those of our younger listeners, they used to put the copies of the film in front of if they had an available copy, they put it behind it. So you would develop this like search image. As soon as you walked in the door, you could see if something was bulkier. And you say, "Oh, that movie's in. We got to go grab it and get it." It was really kind of like grabbing the last Cabbage Patch doll. You know, it was to get a new release. But what I thought was interesting about that is it kind of forced you to watch a lot of movies you probably wouldn't have originally intended to watch. It was kind of like, hey, this one's on the wall. It's new. We need to watch it. You know. I can't tell you how many movies I probably watched because it was there.
Yeah.
Second, third, fifth, 17th choice. You know, it made you watch a lot of crap that you probably wouldn't have otherwise watched. But I also just, again, because here's where the nostalgia comes in, folks. I just really started to miss the experience of going to a Blockbuster because it was kind of a communal experience. You know, you would see people and you talk cinema and you talk film and you'd give recommendations, and total strangers would come up to you and say, "Hey, that's awesome, that's great," or "Hey, put that back, it sucks." You don't really have that luxury anymore, but I really was kind of a cool dynamic.
I always like the staff picks. You know, they had their own like end cap there in the store where they had maybe about 12 or 15 movies that you were like, "Wow, Ed likes this movie," or Francine, she really liked this horror movie. You know, and I would be drawn to a couple of them. You know, you could tell who had like, you know, different kind of tastes, and you know, like kind of appreciated the staff that worked there.
Yeah, I think there's fractured forms of that now with like Letterboxd and all that kind of stuff where people kind of give their recommendations, but it's just not the same. You know, it's just not quite the same. Yeah, so that was kind of I felt nostalgic this week, Mike. So you know, luckily I do a show about nostalgic movies, but. And then it started to compound a little bit because I started on our last show, you know, Aliens. We talked about, you know, I used to go to a cinema that was on Route 66, and it's one of those weird things. I guess growing up in a small town, it's a little more relevant to me. But you know, I literally, when I look back at it now, I literally kind of grew up in a John Cougar Mellencamp song. You know, it was a small little town that had all the little stores, and you know, we'd always go to the ice cream place on Friday, and we'd rent movies on Saturday night, and you know, I just started thinking about how fun that dynamic was, and you don't really realize it, you know, when you're in it. But looking back on it, I do miss those things, especially, and that's how I think I developed my love of cinema. Is that cinema was always kind of the baseline around my memories as a kid. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it was an event thing for us. You know, like watching the movies on Friday and Saturday because. We are still in one of those kind of towns where you don't get all the first run movies sometimes. You know, and the big blockbusters would sometimes skip our town, at least the first weekend. You know, we'd probably get like the big movies the second weekend. But if you really wanted to see it, you had to go to the big city to go see it at a theater or one of the small theaters here in town, which no longer exist. You know, it was always kind of, like I said, an event to go with your family and watch a movie. And that was, I guess if that's nostalgia, then, you know, I really miss that.
I do. And I guess along those same lines, kind of a segue to this is, you know, when you didn't have the option to see a movie, you always had, at least I know regionally these were big, but in my area of the country where I grew up in Chicago, you had the horror movie host on Saturday night, you know, so if you weren't renting something, there was always something to watch on like a local affiliate. And you know, we're really piling this nostalgia on now, Mike, but I started to think about how much I loved not only my horror host, which was Son of Svengoolie out of WFLD in Chicago. He's still going, by the way. He's on MeTV right now, still doing that. But But I started thinking about all the regional horror hosts that would show, either a horror movie or a monster movie, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about this week. And I just started to think about how it's kind of come full circle here, but that was always something we had. And I still watch these guys, and I still think they're fun. But it was the equivalent of probably like local access, cable access now. They would host a really crappy movie. But I would watch it. I would love it because it was a monster movie, and it was on a small little 13-inch black and white TV. But we were staying up late and watching them, so it's all those movies still stick with me.
For us, it was a guy out of Charlotte, Fred Kirby. He wasn't a horror guy; he was a Western. So every Saturday morning, it was the Fred Kirby, little show, and he would show really cheesy Western, either about Bat Masterson or not the John Wayne level movies, but the lower level that had like Gene Autry in it, But that was always something I remember waking up to, and along with my Saturday cartoons was, watching Fred Kirby do his Western, and that was always something I'll remember for all, rest of my life.
Wow, yeah, me too. Well, the sap is getting thick, Mike. I think
let's dive into some crap here.
So we're going to talk. Speaking of that, so we're going to talk about corny movies. We're going to talk about monsters this week, Mike. So this movie that we're going to talk about is Godzilla, not to be confused with the more recent releases. This was the 1998 release, Mike. The movie that kind of unleashed the most deadly force of all time. In this case, which is the U.S. military, which could not. Stormtroopers laughed at them, Mike. They could not manage to hit a 200 foot tall monster. But yeah, they basically destroyed New York. But we'll get to that, I guess, here in a little bit. But Godzilla, 1998. So we're going to get right into it. So, Mike, what do you remember about 1998? Anything good? No,
not much. I remember, I never saw this movie at the theater. So other than that, so my 1998 was probably pretty good then, if I didn't say this.
Well, yeah, you probably had a leg up. But let me set the stage for you, Mike.
Okay. Because my memory's terrible.
So 1998 cinematically was a little bit soft. There wasn't a whole lot of movies in the theater at the time. We had something called the Space Shuttle had just landed, Columbia, whatever that is. We don't do those anymore. The nation was mourning on a couple fronts, Mike. One, Ginger Spice had just left the Spice Girls. So wow. I know that personally hit you pretty hard.
No, I didn't care about her. I'm a Sporty Spice fan.
Were you? Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm more of a posh myself.
Of course.
I think your Spice Girls favorite says a lot about your character.
It does, doesn't it? Right.
So speaking of tragedy, Grandpa Jones from Hee Haw had died, Mike. I know that was a tough one.
Yeah. Okay, I should remember that.
Seinfeld, the season finale of Seinfeld was over, and we all had our opinions on that.
Yes.
And then that was the summer of the soy bomb guy. Remember the soy bomb guy?
Oh yeah, he showed around. Was he Bob Dylan with performance or something?
Yeah. Bob Dylan didn't know what was going on, but he rarely knows what's going on anyway. So I don't know how you tell the difference anymore. So this was a Memorial Day release in 1998, and prior to this, it had like almost a year's worth of really kind of oversaturated commercial hype. I remember seeing this trailer. This trailer was released a year before in 1997. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was kind of set in the New Year's Eve in New York in Times Square, and when the ball starts to drop, and then you see the ball literally like fly into the stands, and it's and I think you saw like a Taco Bell little
yes, that's what I
remember. Chihuahua.
Uh-huh.
But so this movie had literally over 300 commercial tie-ins, and with the success of Independence Day previous year, everybody was kind of hedging their bets that this would be the next big thing. So, but yeah, so sadly, was not the case, but. So, as I mentioned with Independence Day, this was directed by Roland Emmerich, and then written by the very same, and with the Dean Devlin. So we're getting into their territory again, Mike. We had covered Independence Day a few shows back, and we know their proclivity towards blowing things up and smashing things. So they took it another go. This is their follow up to Independence Day, and this was written by both those guys, and the story was written by Ted Elliott. And Ted Elliott kind of specializes in green monsters. He wrote this he wrote the original script, which those guys quickly threw out, and then he also wrote Shrek. So he's got a fetish for green monsters,
guys.
I guess. Mike.
Wow.
And little monsters. He wrote the Fred Savage epic little monsters. So the source material is really choice, all right? So nowhere to go but up. So it started out with the budget of $97 million, and then with the success of Independence Day, the studio Sony felt they could trust these guys a little bit, and they kind of ballooned that up to $130 million. And then through pure excess and a lot of incompetence, the budget swelled to $200 million, Mike. So that's how much this gem costs. So it was following, I think, Deep Impact had been in the theaters a couple weeks before, so we were already in this destruction mode.
And Armageddon.
In Armageddon, coming out a little bit later, sure.
I don't want to miss a thing.
No, they're all gems. So this movie was 2 hours and 20 minutes long, Mike, and 11 minutes of which actually show Godzilla. The other 2 hours and 9 minutes were they trusted the cast.
Carry
Mike,
this, please.
Mike, let's talk about the principal players. Do you want to walk us through the cast?
Yes, and I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go from least important to most important. Let's do it that way.
How can you
tell? Yeah, right. Matthew Broderick. He's our worm guy with a funny last name, which ha ha ha, and nobody can pronounce his last name. Huh? Hey, let's see how long we can run that gimmick. Who's most of the time in this movie is auditioning for his role in The Producers. I can't tell you how many scenes in this movie where it seems like he's ready to just crack up. Like every line he says is teetering on the edge of him, just like doing a Ferris Bueller and just breaking the fourth wall and looking at the audience.
It's is that what you want me to say? Really?
Yeah, it's just so bizarre. But we'll get more.
I got some examples. I got some good examples.
Thank you. Okay, this lady Maria Patillo. I have no idea what else she has been in. She's our reporter. Come to be reporter who's the love interest to. Basically, in this movie, she's a cardboard cutout. She's terrible. Natalie Portman in The Phantom Menace looked like an Oscar winner.
I thought she was more like a bargain bin Kelly Ripa.
Okay,
Kelly Ripa light.
I can see that. Okay, then we come to our best actor in the whole movie, John Reno. He's our French guy who's he has our tie-in to The Fifth Element, where he was a actor for one of Luc Besson's movies, The Professional. Right. And I also remember from the Da Vinci Code, and I loved him in Ronin, which is kind of an underrated movie about a bank heist.
Yeah, that's right. He was in that.
Yeah, then a lot of other French movies. We also have a reunion of Simpsons cast members. We have Hank Azaria, who in this movie plays, he's a cameraman known as Animal, which I can't tell you the amount of cringe I could feel whenever I heard his name mentioned. But he's better known as Mr. Helen Hunt. I think they're still married. Correct. I'm not sure. The other Simpsons people were Harry Shearer, who in this movie he's doing his Kent Brockman, kind of like a live version of it, which
couldn't get past it. Sorry.
No, it was just for laughs, of course. And then Nancy Cartwright, who has a really small role in this movie that I noticed, and she's obviously the voice of Bart Simpson, but she's.
What was wrong with her hand? Did you notice her hand was all damaged?
No, I didn't notice that. Was it like a Dennis Hopper kind of thing in Speed, where he was trying to show that she had been in an explosion or something?
I'm going to go with that one, yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Then we have our military guys. We have Doug Savant, who... Yeah, he kind of chewed the scenery in this one a little bit, didn't he? He's more known for his TV roles. People might know him from... I knew him from Melrose Place, and then my wife remembered he was in Desperate Housewives, which, great, good for him. Kevin Dunn, he plays the Colonel. He's known more for comic roles. This was kind of a weird role for him, but obviously this movie had its own problems. He might be known more for his role in Veep. That's what I knew him from. And Mr. Witwicky from Transformers. He was Shia LaBeouf's dad in those movies, if anyone cares. And then let's round out our meaty cast here with Vicki Lewis. She plays the scientist lady who's a paleontologist. I knew her from News Radio. That was about it. She was in that TV show. And then
kind of hormonally imbalanced too, by the way.
Yeah. And
what was the point of there? I don't know.
I don't know. The whole flirting with the title. the Matthew
Yeah.
Broderick Tatopoulos guy. Oh my God,
Tatopoulos.
Tatopoulos. And then
Corpulus.
and I want to do a special mention for Frank Welker. He's our voice guy for a lot of Godzilla noises in this movie, and he's also the voice of Fred from Scooby Doo. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and did additional sound for The Simpsons as well.
Wait,
So,
and I want to do a special mention, honorable mention.
okay.
He's only in the movie for about 10 seconds, but the guy from the 24 TV show, he's in this movie. He's like a
Yep.
He's
always military brass. Or he's
Yep.
always like Secret Service and
Right.
Yeah, every role he's ever played. Yeah.
His claim to fame is, from what Lydia told me, my wife, she said he's been in every 24 season ever. The only cast member to ever be in all the 24. So there.
Every movie he's ever been, he's the guy that always has to wake up the president.
Oh yeah. There's like 3 or 4 guys in this movie too that are military brass kind of guys that
Yeah,
you're like, hey, that guy, I saw him. He was an admiral in another movie, or this guy, he was a general in that movie. And the guy who plays the mayor, I've known him from somewhere. I think he was in Barton Fink, but he's like the real the wormy mayor in this movie. But I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
I apologize.
His name's Michael Lerner, and
that's right. Okay,
people might remember him from the movie Elf. He was the mean publisher that made
oh yes,
James Caan work on Christmas Eve. Yeah,
Elf. That's the role.
So
okay.
yeah, I'll get to him. And his sidekick there in a second. So
Mayor Ebert.
So yeah. So Mayor Ebert. So Dean Devlin had an axe to grind against Siskel and Ebert because they had the nerve to not like their previous 2 movies, Stargate and Independence Day. So in a very clever, very nuanced way, they call him Mayor Ebert and his friend Gene. So yeah, it's very subtle, guys. Nice work.
Do you like the little campaign posters of Mayor Ebert with his thumbs up? You know, I was like, oh my god.
Yeah. So that's just one example of the prime writing of this. Yeah.
Wow.
So just some other stories about this before we jump in. So this was, Steven Spielberg really tried to talk Roland Emmerich out of directing this movie because for several reasons. One is that, most people that were Godzilla fans were truly that, and he knew the source material, and it had nothing really to do with Godzilla, but he tried to talk him out of it, but to no avail. Because word got out that these boys were not going to follow. They'd acquired the rights from Toho, Japan. That's the production studio that owns the Godzilla franchise. Word got out that they weren't really going to do it justice, and believe it or not, Mike, there is a subreddit, there is a subculture of Godzilla fans out there that got upset enough to argue with Dean Devlin on the message boards when those things had just started. So there's constant chatter about that.
God bless those guys.
And we mentioned Roland Emmerich being the director. This was originally kind of written for James Cameron in 1990. He was kind of roughly committed, but he wanted a little more creative control, and they didn't give it to him. So they passed the baton to Tim Burton around 1992, who might have done something pretty cool with this, but he ultimately passed. And then they kind of had struck a deal contractually with Jan de Bont. We can't shake this butthole, Mike. Every time we can't get rid of Jan de Bont. We can't get rid of this guy. But he opted out and decided to do. He wanted to bring Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt into the Godzilla, but he stole these guys and decided to go make Twister instead. But yeah, so because of the rising budget and the marketing costs, Sony had a unmerited, never had been done before. They asked that the theaters split the revenue 90-10, because typically when theaters show a movie, they get about 60% of the ticket sales. I'm sorry, the studio gets 60% of the ticket sales. They get whatever's left. But Sony demanded that they get 90% of the ticket sales for this movie.
Good Lord.
To cover their costs. So not only did they really not make a good movie, they really kind of screwed the only opportunity, the outlet for it in the first place. So there's a lot of controversy, as they say, Mike. So at the end of the day, Memorial Day weekend, the movie going public was kind of wrapped into this frenzy. They wanted to go see Godzilla, and we'll kind of get into it now, Mike. So I remember the first time I saw this. It was one of the first movies I saw after moving here from Chicago back in the late '90s. I saw this by myself in the local theater here at my first viewing. because I couldn't find anybody in the world that would want to go with me in my own family. So I probably should have took that. But I remember seeing it and not being disappointed. I was a dinosaur kid, and I loved monster movies as a kid. So I saw this at a mere 26 years old and still kind of a suspended adolescent. So I thought it was fine. I didn't really think about too much of it at the time. Didn't think it was great. But yeah, I kind of walk out of that theater saying, "Hey, that wasn't too bad." Mike, do you remember the first time you saw this one?
In '98, I kind of missed the boat on this one, and kind of skipped this one. I was not a big Godzilla fan. I didn't like the King Kong movies. I didn't like Godzilla movies. I'm that guy, and maybe it's because what they did to Raymond Burr, back in the day. But that's neither here nor there. The first time I saw it was when we saw this in Rift Tracks did it, kind of a spoof of it about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
And that kind of glossed over my viewing of it this time after watching 3 guys make fun of the movie continuously during the whole run of it. You kind of come out jaded and think, oh, that movie was a stink burger. And after you watch it. This time I want to see it without that kind of chatter in the background and see if that movie really was as bad as it came out to be.
Yeah, I'm dying to know what you came out of it left to your own devices. So,
yes.
So
I'll leave it a mystery.
So it's Memorial Day 1998, and we're dying to see monsters. So Mike, if you're ready, hit the button. So the movie kind of opens up with these kind of sepia-toned images of bomb footage, and we hear the La Marseillaise music playing, so we know it's French, right? But it kind of focuses around these atomic tests being performed way back when, and they're dropping a lot of stock footage. I was disappointed we didn't get to see the fat guy getting hit by the cannonball here, but all the other stock.
Or the guy wearing the airplane wings trying to fly runs into a building. I always like that guy.
That guy, yeah. But yeah, so they're showing these atomic tests, and they show these big iguanas kind of dopily looking on.
Yes, and they're not Tahitian iguanas. Those are Galapagos marine iguanas.
Those are Galapagos. Yeah.
Yes, that makes me very angry.
Yeah. So, as a zoology major, Mike, I appreciate the difference there. So we kind of open. Yeah. So as the credits kind of finish up, we kind of open up on this fishing boat in the South Pacific in Japan, and they kind of get attacked, of course, and. The next scene is, as the aforementioned, our hero, Ferris Bueller. He's singing. He's literally singing in the rain. The rain, because hey, I'm on Broadway. In case you didn't know,
hat on backwards too. Like, just oh my god, can you make yourself any more douchier?
No, well, you can. You can wear a beret, which is what he was wearing. A lot of berets in this movie, Mike.
Hey, special mention to the Japanese fishermen that are attacked on their cargo ship. I love the fact that he's watching. I love the fact he's watching sumo while eating his noodles.
yeah. I think I saw all these actors on MASH at one point too. So.
Yes, and the guy from Die Hard, the long haired guy who he always dies in every movie he's in. I love that guy.
He's the greatest. Died by an ice cream cone in the Last Action Hero, if I recall.
That was it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. But we digress. So you got Matthew Broderick. He's a biologist working for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and he's doing he's studying the effects of radiation on these worms in Russia, which are actually Chernobyl. Wasn't that where Chernobyl was in Ukraine, right? Not Russia.
Ukraine, yeah. Uh-huh.
So a slew of technical errors here, but the Russian police come in. They escort these government agents saying, "Hey, you're coming with us." So then we kind of quickly cut back to the city so nice they named it twice in New York, where we see Aubrey, the female lead, working in the news station, and of course she's working for Ken Brockman, as we mentioned, and we kind of established that she's a struggling news reporter. It's like, okay, so there's 2 hours worth of her story that she's going to carry the movie for us on this premise, and then just to kind of cut to the chase, about 25 minutes in, Godzilla decides to come to New York, and I thought was interesting here is because how did he get through the Panama Canal?
Yes.
Did he go? He went the wrong way around, or he went through the Panama Canal.
he made a left turn at Albuquerque. Like, how did he? Okay.
Yeah.
Now they make a remark in this movie about he ends up in New York, and And of course, Matthew Broderick's like, it's the perfect place. It's an island surrounded by water. Okay, well, obviously, an island is surrounded by water. Thank you. But
Thank you.
how did he know? Why didn't he stop and say Charleston, South Carolina here? They're surrounded by water. Why New York?
Pawleys Island.
Where was this?
Yeah.
Did he have a map? Did he just open up a map and say, hey, I'm in Tahiti here. Let me go through the Panama Canal. Well, maybe the locks were reversed. He had to just go through the land.
Or
that's fine.
Cuba, and that's an island.
What was his homing beacon? Well, they do show a map in the movie where he actually lands in Jamaica. I don't know if you caught that, but he does.
I would stay there.
Make a stop. He makes a stop at maybe Kingston. I don't know where he ended up. He ends up in New York, and I have no idea what brought him there. Like there was that science is just thrown out the window and just kind of hope you don't notice kind of thing. It's just.
Well, I think we're on the wrong path already, Mike. Let's kind of get back. Logic has long since passed us here. So.
Just like the Aliens movie where I want to see the alien carrying Newt like a football. I want to see Godzilla opening up his trifold map and looking for New York on it and going, oh, there's some water. Right. Yeah, that looks perfect.
Yeah. So anyway, so Godzilla, basically attacks Manhattan and causes a big mess. And what I thought was interesting here, Mike, is the impact. The cars jump, but the people around them just keep their footing. Those New Yorkers are very, very dense.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so of course, that's where we get introduced to Mayor Ebert and his fussy little approach at everything. And then the military comes in, so don't worry, they're going to take care of everything, right? So they set up a command center in Jersey, of all places, and they evacuate Manhattan, which is supposed to be what happened, but there's a curious amount of people and businesses still in there for an evacuation. Like
drugstores, for instance, that seem to be operating at normal levels.
Yeah, no problem, right? One thing that really kind of annoyed me here was, beyond the gross incompetence of the American military, which is portrayed here, is, how many sirs and saluting do you need to have? We get it. It's the military. We get it. But they salute at every little thing.
Yeah. I have trouble too with the whole, line of command is you got a colonel. Okay. Where your generals? They show up later, but they don't demote them. They don't take charge. The colonel's in charge the whole time. And his second in command is a sergeant. So what gives here? Why do these two guys have so much control over the situation?
Yeah, a sergeant with a stuttering problem and some serious self-confidence issues, apparently. I thought, I knew the minute they introduced that kind of element, it's like, oh my God, I've got to put up with this for 2 hours. But But anyway, we're going to keep going. So So the military is brought in. They're trying to figure out a way to get Godzilla out of Manhattan, and of course they defer to Ferris Bueller for all their major military operations. He suggests that they on Fifth Avenue they just put a bunch of fish, 12 dump trucks full of fish get emptied out in the middle of the intersection there, and they draw them out, and that's where we get our first reveal of the monster, which is 45 minutes in.
Yeah, almost an hour.
So he shows up, and Matthew Broderick rents a little Polaroid camera out of a vending machine, which I thought was adorable, and takes these, I'm sure, high quality pictures of it. Has a little bonding scene with them, and of course the military, make a meal of it, and they basically blow up. They try to attack Godzilla. Godzilla runs for it. And the next thing you know, all of Manhattan's destroyed. Like all these iconic things in New York, you would think would get destroyed by Godzilla, right? Like the Flatiron Building, and the Chrysler Building. But no, why not have Godzilla destroy those things? But no, they just that's a friendly fire, Mike. So Godzilla runs back into the I guess the sewers. Another thing I noticed here, they didn't really know the scale of Godzilla really shifted. Sometimes he was never the same size,
right?
In any scene. Did you notice that?
He's like an octopus. He can be as big as he wants to be, and then he can drill down into a little manhole, basically, or a storm drop pipe, and you're like, wow, he fit down here. That's great.
Yeah, Godzilla stinks. I mean, the design of Godzilla was cool. They made him kind of dinosaur-like, but one of the things that Toho kind of wanted as conditions of giving up this property was that there's a few rules. That one, Godzilla could only have 4 fingers. He couldn't die in the film. And there's also some other to make him more characteristic of the guy in the rubber suit that has some personality.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I ultimately missed about Godzilla here. He's not really Godzilla. He's just this
No.
big dumb animal. That's just is more of a naturalistic approach to this thing, and
Yeah.
he had no personality. The Godzilla I remember has literally done these things, Mike, and I made a list. He's fist bumped. He's applauded himself. He's dabbed.
Yeah, he does a lot of dancing in the Japanese movies.
Yeah, he does a lot of. He's done Celtic dancing, Mike, and he's done like a 2.5 mile flying drop kick.
Yes, that's my favorite. He can hover. I love that.
But
part.
but he does like this fist bump where he says yes, sometimes. But yeah, not this Godzilla. But I kind of miss that.
He did a lot. He looks in the Japanese movie. I know we'll get to this later, but in the Japanese movies, he looks like he's almost having fun. Like
exactly.
he'll pick up a skyscraper and kind of like shake it like a bag of chips into his mouth, and just like you say, the dancing. And it took so long for him to finally blow fire out of his mouth. And even in this movie, it's kind of like it's only because the car was on fire that his breath is able to ignite. But there were certain things that he had a very square jaw. It's kind of like a Dolph Lundgren Godzilla, very boxy.
Yeah, the Japanese Godzilla is like, it's implied that everything he does is, hey, get a load of me.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, remember in Godzilla versus the Sea Monster when he actually he played soccer with the lobster with that giant boulder?
Yes,
he actually scored a header. Yeah, no such joy here.
No,
but anyway, so let's get back to this piece of crap. All right, so Godzilla kind of disappears, and nobody can understand how that happens. And then at this point, we try to establish our romantic subplot where Aubrey and Ferris kind of meet each other, and Aubrey's it's implied that she broke it off and broke his heart, and it's been years.
She was a jerk. She was an absolute jerk. I mean, like he says, "Oh yeah, I'm still," and she does all this work to get to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm still kind of mad at you," and she just walks away. Oh well, if you're gonna be that way, it's like
yes, right. So they get together at some point, and she notices that he's got some top secret video of his involvement on the inside of this team, and she steals it only because it's conveniently marked top secret. Left on the table marked top secret, so she ends up taking it and ghosting him, breaking his heart again. And then in the meantime, Matthew Broderick goes to a conveniently opened bodega in New York and buys like 50 pregnancy tests. Pregnancy tests, forgetting the fact as a biologist that those only work for mammal hormones and not reptile. But so he comes to the conclusion that through this experiment that he does, like a Bill Nye the Science Guy experiment on the blood he retrieved from the original fish scene, and finds out that Godzilla is pregnant. Total PG, Mike. So here we go already. So he suspects that the Godzilla has a nest on somewhere on Manhattan Island. So he goes back to the military team, and as they're kind of confronting him about this theory, they look on the TV and see Aubrey basically doing a news report on the stolen footage, and they realize that she got that from him, so that they fire Matthew Broderick. So he's dejectedly getting into this cab, and he kind of gets hijacked by this French team that had kind of been working in parallel here, led by Jean Reno. And all the guys are named Jean-Pierre, Jean-Luc, Jean. Yeah. So,
and do you know that America has bad food and bad coffee?
They kind of made that point a couple times. No croissant, Mike, only donuts. But they don't even like our French roast. But they're part of a small French Secret Service team that's trying that has splintered off from the French government and is trying to make amends for the sins of the past by developing these nuclear programs and trying to so they're trying to kill Godzilla. And they get wind that that Matthew Broderick is free now, so they kind of recruit him on their side. So they kind of splinter out and make their own attempt to go after him. So and there's just a series of scenes in the sewer and some scenes in Central Park where they continue to shoot this thing to no avail. Mike, it reminded me of a movie we're very fond of, where your weapons are useless against me. Is
How many times do I need to tell you?
Yeah, how many times do I do this? But yes, they haven't figured out that their weapons don't do anything to Godzilla. But anyway, so it ends with this kind of climactic scene in Central Park where they have the great idea that, because they can't aim and hit anything, they need like heat-seeking missiles to kind of aim for them. So they kind of draw them out in Central Park, and they still continue to miss. And then Godzilla jumps into the Hudson River, which I thought was fun here, Mike, because apparently he really nailed that dive because there's very little splash. Something with that mass would just cause this huge wave. But
the Russian judge gave him a 10.
Yeah, oddly, the Japanese only a 6, but the Navy is equally as incompetent, and this submarine shows up again from Los Angeles for some reason. And if anybody knows anything about geography, the Hudson River is not deep enough to accommodate a submarine. And anyway, we'll let that go. But yeah, so as they're having this kind of climactic battle in Manhattan, the other team with Animal and Aubrey, and
Don't say
they're chasing. The track leads them to Madison Square Garden, of course.
Right.
So in a very, very long third act, they're going in and out of Madison Square Garden, and they get to the point where they see all the eggs being laid right there on the garden floor.
Do you notice they're still showing the fish flopping around like they're still alive? It's like,
yeah, no, those fish.
No,
yeah.
no, those fish have been out of the water for maybe a couple of days now. They're probably dead. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's lots of eggs being laid on the garden floor. Yeah, so even more than the Knicks would lay. But yeah, so they had this great idea they're going to blow up all the eggs. So they obviously they go down there and they kind of wire up each one, and then of course the eggs start hatching right there in front of everybody. Mike.
Of course. And
then we get the Velociraptor scene from Jurassic Park for about 25 minutes. The little baby Godzilla's, Mike.
I look familiar, huh?
Yeah, so they're just trying to find a way to end the movie at this point, and so Aubrey, does her little internal report from the inside the garden, kind of closes her little subplot. I'm so glad that Aubrey got her just due. So now we can end the movie. After the report, they find out that our top-notch military is going to blow up the garden, and they've got 6 minutes to get out of there. So, oddly enough, Mike, they do get out, and
you realize how patient those. I almost called them Velociraptors there. Do you realize how patient the Godzilla Juniors were waiting in the lobby? Like it's like they were waiting for their ride home. Like, dude, there are rows of glass doors. Just go through there. And they're kind of milling around the foyer there in the lobby, just waiting for some popcorn or something.
Were they waiting in the lobby like Frank Cantangelo from Godfather 2? They can't get in to see Mike.
No, they can't. Canopies.
No canopies. So the Madison Square Garden goes boom, and then of course Godzilla's underneath the garden. So she. I guess you got to do the right pronouns here, Mike.
Yeah, this is a they.
So they come up and see all their dead babies, and that doesn't sit very well with Godzilla. So he starts to go play havoc in Manhattan again. And then there's this really ridiculous chase where the good guys are in a cab and they're getting chased by Godzilla through the town. And there's actually 2 lines of dialogue in this movie that I thought really would merit or warrant a call out, Mike. The first one is that's a lot of fish. that was the clever writing to explain all the fish on Fifth Avenue there. Yes. And my favorite one is when they get Godzilla bites the cab and brings they got him in his mouth.
Yes.
There's a line where Matthew Broderick says, "Okay, we're in its mouth." That was written on the page, Mike. We're in its mouth.
Somebody wrote this down. I love the Hank Azaria line of "We got to go the other way. We're going the wrong way." It's like, really?
Yeah. So their clever plot device here is they find a random electrical cable and shock one of Godzilla's teeth. And then they conveniently fall 60 feet onto the bridge and drive away. So they end up. So Godzilla chases them out onto I forget what bridge on suspension
Brooklyn Bridge.
Was it the Brooklyn Bridge? Of course
Yeah.
it is. Of course it is. Right.
Yep.
I think the Tappan Zee Bridge is probably closer to that location, but whatever. So, uh, so then suddenly Godzilla is vulnerable, and he gets kind of hung up in the suspension cables, and then a couple F-14 missiles take out Godzilla. And they had the little King Kong ending where you can hear his heartbeat, and Ferris Bueller goes up and says his goodbyes, and
the light goes out in the eyes of Godzilla.
And then we get graced to the song Kashmir, but it's not Kashmir, Mike. It's not. It's Puff,
what was it?
It's Puff Daddy.
Yeah.
It's Kashmir with P Diddy saying yeah, that's all it is. Yeah,
That song was dreadful. It really was. If you listen to the lyrics, like I was forced to last night, I was just like, what is this? What does this have to do with the movie? It had nothing to do with the movie.
I listened to the lyrics because I was so angry that Sean Combs, who makes you call him something new every 4 or 5 years, there's a line here: try to trap me, bad rap. I said yes, bad rap, very good, very apropos.
And I want to push this idea forward here that this is the only movie I can think of that has 2 closing credit songs that were both remakes of an English artist, and they're both terrible.
Yeah, I'm a bigger fan of the Wallflowers covering Bowie's Heroes.
It's
That's
okay. It doesn't have David Bowie's energy or emotion in it. But
at least they played instruments and did a different arrangement. That's something. But there's some other good music. I mean, the Foo Fighters in here, and Rage Against the Machine is on the soundtrack, which I was not expecting. But again, they play all the good songs in the background very quietly, so you don't get confused about what culture is. Yeah. So anyway, that's the end of the movie, Mike. And wow, my butt was a little sore in that chair after this one. It's like, wow, that was a lot to sit through, right? So let's talk about the aftermath, right? So we mentioned that there's like 300 merchandising tie-ins here, and all those Taco Bell meals probably didn't merit this one, but it did end up making like $44 million on its opening holiday weekend, which is not too shabby in 1998 inflation-wise. It made $136 million in its domestic run, which is a significant lower amount than they were anticipating for this, and it did make $376 million worldwide. It's pretty much in Japan. Yeah, it's about $500,000.
Yeah, that's probably break even. If you think of it as $200 million to make, and then marketing and advertising, it's probably, they always say that's like almost about the same as the cost of making it. So you would think there's probably $350 or $400 million into this movie.
Yeah, but in Hollywood speak, it didn't make enough money to merit a sequel, and that's really all they that's their only gauge. It was actually set for like 3 movies.
Yeah,
when they ended, it shows you how.
Yeah, when they ended it with the egg kind of vibrating and cracking at the end, you're like, oh no, don't do this. Don't.
Yeah, I did fail to mention at the end they do this very deliberate scene where they're slowly panned into the bowels of a flaming Madison Square Garden, and they kind of zoom in on the egg and like, okay, all right, it's gonna crack open. Just open up. We know, we get it. And of course it does.
It's like the end of Space Mutiny, where like, yeah, he's alive. Yeah. We get it. Open your eyes.
He's alive. We get it. Wrap it up. Been done before. But yeah, so that's the end, Mike. And like I said, the Godzilla folks did not like this because it wasn't a Godzilla movie. There's no elements of Godzilla whatsoever. Mm-hmm. As a standalone movie, it might have been okay, but they just kind of co-opted the name to get people to see this. But yeah, so but it did give us something to make fun of, Mike. So I guess that's one good thing about it.
Yeah,
it provided material for our 13th show.
There you go. We got something to laugh at.
So let's do it our justice, because there's a few things we want to wrap up before we get out of here today. So just to put it in the grumpy meter again, I saw this by myself the first time, and I came out of the theater pretty happy. I probably gave it a 4 out of 5. But now it's like, the first thing I notice is that, the music and I the dialogue and just not, is really kind of a victim of the time, that's kind of how things had morphed into at the time. This weird kind of rapid fire, don't take anything too seriously, very very glib dialogue. And the first thought to me was, you could easily take 45 minutes out of this movie. Easily.
Yep.
it was tolerable, Mike, as a
Wow.
big dumb popcorn movie, but that's not good enough anymore. So I would go 1.5, maybe 2 stars tops,
Mm.
as my grumpy review at my older eyes, Mike. What about you?
I'm glad you asked. Um, Obviously, like I said, when I watched it with riff tracks, kind of as a background with it, knew it was a bad movie, but I knew these guys were kind of poking fun at it, and so I thought, well, it's bad, but it's not that bad. It's not Plan 9 or The Room kind of bad. Seemed interesting. So when I watched this time, like I said, I'm kind of watching it with my own opinion on it and without the laugh track, and
Yeah.
wow, it is worse. It's much better. It is much better to watch this movie with guys making fun of it. Trust me. This movie's terrible. 1 star. I can't even. I'm watching this last night and it did not hold my attention. The tone of it was terrible. The constant back and forth from glib, punny jokes to serious scenes of people blowing up and dying was just too much.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too much comedy in this movie. You think of any Japanese Godzilla movie, and they're not funny. They're hilarious because there's a guy in a suit like breaking apart a model, but
Yeah.
they're serious. Everybody in the movie is like looking up and wide eyed and scared. These
Yeah.
people just like I said earlier, Matthew Broderick. You expect him to break into like a song, and it's just there's no stakes. You think about like Aliens we watched last time, and you had a character Newt like a kid, and it kind of put some stakes to it. You're like, wow, there's somebody that she needs to rescue. Like there's something there. Here, there's nothing like that. There's no charisma or for our leads. There's some French guys, like you said, Jean-Luc, John Andre, and they all become food for the Velociraptors. And
Yeah.
it's like I said, it's not grim enough, and it's too silly to be serious.
You know what was a telltale sign for me?
Yeah.
On the radar, when they had the fish on there, they had a big fish icon on the radar. So us, the dumb audience, could know that's where the fish were.
Didn't you like the footprints in Panama that were exactly formed? Like there was no footprint that like at least was missing half a toe or something. Like every footprint was like a kid would have
that
drawn.
first footprint looked nothing like Godzilla's feet, by the way, unless he had his toes cut off. But I'm sorry, finish your point, Mike.
Oh, I want to take you through a sequence let's say in the middle of this movie. This is just to give you an idea of what our auteurs of this movie thought of Godzilla. We come to a scene and you see Godzilla's back and they play music. I swear it was lifted straight from Jurassic Park, but that's majestic. Wow, there's a big monster walking through New York. And then the next scene, you see the Flatiron Building blowing up not because of Godzilla, because we can't shoot straight. And then the next scene after that, a statue falls comically on Matthew Broderick. Doesn't kill him, but falls on him. Woohoo, that's funny. Then
you almost died.
Next scene, men die in a horrible fireball in their helicopters. And the Chrysler building explodes. Oh my gosh, a rogue missile from one of the helicopters hits the Chrysler building.
Yeah.
Next scene after that, we cut to Jimmy and Fred stealing electronics from a store and almost get hit.
What the hell was that scene? Yeah, exactly. What the hell was that bad feeling he gets, Mike? Shut up.
Then right after that,
time.
Then right after that, literally seconds after this scene, where the stupid idiots almost hit by Godzilla, helicopters crash and explode again. Some more men die, and then we cut to Matthew Broderick, who, after the sergeant says, "We did nothing," Matthew Broderick says, "Well, we fed him."
Yeah.
There's your little capsulated scene
of
this movie, and just like I said, the ups and downs of bad tone, bad. It's like there was comedy in Independence Day, but it was comic relief. You still felt the situation was grim and dire, and there were stakes involved. People died. This movie, you never felt that once. The characters were charisma vacuums, and like I said, there were just too many scenes where you felt like the actors and actresses were just like not in the same place that Godzilla was, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
the tone was all over the place.
No, it's
Charisma
horrible.
vacuums. I like that one, Mike. I'm going to use that one.
Right. And I got another one for you. Instead of calling New York the
Like,
city that never sleeps, can we call it the city where the sun never shines? Because how many times was it goddamn raining in this movie?
oh, how dark, how
Yeah.
dark could it be too? Again, one of my pet peeves: just shoot it in the dark and shoot it in the rain,
Yep.
and nobody will see all your crap.
Oh, exactly.
So, yeah, just
Oh,
all the stuff you just mentioned, Mike, just got me even angrier because it just
I'm
delayed the
sorry.
ending.
No. So true.
That's all I really wanted.
Yeah,
Can it be over now?
we got one of those fake endings where you see MSG blow up and you're like, oh, John Reno can get his coffee now. Like, okay, it's over. No, Godzilla's still alive. And they get that whole crappy scene of them riding their damn taxi cab. God almighty.
Yeah. Oh well. But hey, well, there. Let's take a breath, step back. Let's talk about something nicer, Mike. So, for those that may have been kind enough to follow us through our little journey here, you may realize that this is our 13th show, and this is going to kind of formally end our first season. Just arbitrarily, we picked 13 because that's what the old television shows used to do for episodes, 13 episodes. So we're going to jump into our second season here. Coming up soon, and we'll kind of change the nomenclature to make sure everybody follows. But that doesn't mean we're going to continue. We're not going to go on hiatus. We're just going to continue to pump these things out. But what we do want to do is kind of come to some closure, a little bit of a retrospective on our first 13 shows and just how much fun we've had doing this and how much we've really enjoyed presenting these shows and our dumb little take on them. So we want to thank everybody that's listened this far, and we have nothing but big plans for this show going forward. We have hundreds and hundreds of movies that we've only scratched the surface for, and we just can't wait to get into it and to bring them to you guys. So again, thank you for everybody for this kind of benchmark. A lot of podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes because there's fatigue. There's nothing really to talk about. But we picked something, Mike. Less than favorable movies. There's always going to be a lot of those.
Oh yeah.
So
a lot of mining to do.
Yeah, a lot of mining to do. But again, we want to thank you guys for sticking with us for this long. And like I said, this is just the start for our where we're headed. So, Mike, anything on that front on your end?
Yes, sir. When you said the word retrospective, it got me thinking. I have a sheet here, Justin, which is reminiscent of like a detective movie where you see the cop is kind of connecting the evidence. You see red thread, you see photographs, you see 8x10 glossies.
The big wall with all the yarn and the
yes,
notes. Yeah,
that got me thinking. What about Godzilla from 1998? Can I connect with all of the podcasts we've already done? So
there's a lot of yarn here.
I was able to connect each movie, and I'm going to go through each one with you. Let's start off with Twister. Can you imagine what the possible connection to Twister and Godzilla would be, besides Mrs. Hank Azaria in the movie?
No, you better tell me, Mike.
We have eye-rolling jump the shark moments, both involving vehicles. In Twister, we have a scene where a truck, to evade a tornado, has to go through a moving house that's rotating along a road. I'm sure you remember this scene.
I believe every minute of it, too.
Where Bill and Joe somehow managed to drive through a house. This is great.
I
Fantastic.
think we're going in.
Godzilla? Godzilla, we have a taxi cab that enters Godzilla's mouth and somehow manages to escape. Very reminiscent. Unscathed. Now was Twister. Second movie, Independence Day. Obviously, we have the Devlin Emmerich tie-in, and we also have the Harry Shearer, who was in Godzilla, and Jeff Goldblum, who's in Independence Day. You got that combination. They're both in the right stuff.
Yeah.
But the connection I thought of was the mini models, which is probably one of the best parts of both movies, is the fact that they got a team to create these models and blow them up. In Independence Day, you have the White House and you have the Empire State Building, just kablooey. In Godzilla, you have the Flatiron Building and the Chrysler Building, creating a very interesting explosion. And
cool practical effects, always cool.
Yeah, one of the only things I can say is good about Godzilla. So there you go.
Yeah.
Our third podcast was Tim Burton's Batman. My connection on this is dark and rainy. Both Gotham City and New York, they're always shot in the dark. They're always raining. Yeah. So there you go. Interview with a Vampire. This was a tough one. Both have terrible, terrible closing credit songs that are rip-off of English bands.
That's an
And
easy one, yeah.
yep, Interview with a Vampire has Guns N' Roses warbling out "Sympathy for the Devil," of course. And in
Ooh.
Godzilla, we have, obviously Kashmir from Led Zeppelin being used, and Heroes from David
Used
Bowie.
is the word. Used is
Yes.
the word, yeah.
There you go.
Used.
Fifth podcast, we had The Rock. We had, obviously, the airplanes, approaching our landmark, building at this end, ready to shoot missiles. That's kind of common. But the common theme of this one is the Heroes Out of Water complex. It is the scientific nerd guy putting into a situation where he has to work with the military. We have Nick Cage as something Goodspeed, and he's our chemical super freak.
That's Stanley Goodspeed, Mike.
Stanley, thank you. Appreciate that. And this one, you have, in Godzilla, you have Matthew Broderick, who is our biology nerd, who is taking out of his element and putting to another military situation. So,
not all heroes wear capes, Mike.
Right. I call it the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court kind of complex, where all of a sudden you bring in a guy who shouldn't be where he should be, and he's the expert. Everybody's like, wow, this guy's great.
There you go.
That's your relation to The Rock. Superman 2 setting. You have Metropolis, you have New York City, but the goofy scenes of citizens in peril. You have Joe the Fisherman in Godzilla, who I think he's played by an old actor. I can't remember the guy's name. But much like in Superman 2, where it has goofy characters kind of, oh, what's going on? You got you got people pointing up in the sky, and you got guys flying around, like you say, like you got vehicles moving, but the people don't quite move. It's the same kind of thing.
Right.
The Shining. I call this the horror and humor kind of thing. There's no relation to this movie other than the hotel manager last name was Ullman, and The Simpsons TV show was a spinoff from the Tracy Ullman show. So, and there's 3 actors in Godzilla from The Simpsons. So there you go. That was a tough
stretch, but keep going.
Phantom Menace. We have 2 Franks. This is my favorite one. There are 2 Franks. We have Frank Welker in Godzilla doing the voices for the creature Godzilla. In Phantom Menace, you have Frank Oz, who is doing the voices of Yoda. And there you go.
Not bad.
And you also have the some of the same effects from Industrial Lights and Morons. Next movie we have is Jurassic Park: Lost Kingdom. This is a tampering in God's domain kind of relation. Obviously, you got the Velociraptors who come out of the out of the field and attack our heroes as they're trying to escape. This movie had eggs with Godzilla Juniors that came out. They look very similar to
direct ripoff. Yeah.
Yes. And I also wanted to include unlikable main characters, Matthew Broderick, Jeff Goldblum, kind of peas in a pod.
You got to let the Goldblum thing go, bud.
I'm sorry. I can't help it.
He's a very talented actor.
He is. Speed. Obviously, remember Speed is a movie, and the only relation I can think of this was we had subway scenes and we had street racing. We have a bus and Speed, and we have a taxi and Godzilla, both doing impossible car stunts. We have Cameron Fry, Ferris Bueller's best bud. Obviously, he's in Speed. Right. So there you go for that one. Fifth Element. The link I have on this one is Stupid Authority. It's Luke. We have a incompetent military, I guess is the best way to put it. It's pervasive in Fifth Element. It's obvious the main theme in Godzilla. The military is just inept. And you have Luc Besson, who's directed John Reno, who's director of Fifth Element. So maybe that's a slight.
There you go. Not bad.
And then we have our last one, which is Aliens. This destroying eggs. We have the monster hunt theme. Obviously, that's perfect.
Right.
But you have to have a scene, kind of a climactic scene of eggs being destroyed, and you have muffiny-haired Paul Reiser, who was a co-star of Hank Azaria in Mad About You. So I got to keep mentioning that. I think Hank Azaria was he was a no, not the kiddo. I think he was their dog walker. If I can remember that TV show, which came on before Seinfeld. But there you go.
I just kept hearing Mo Sizlak. Mo.
Oh, yes, that's right. Mo.
All I could keep hearing, but especially the Ajis scene. But yeah.
Yeah.
So Mike, that was a brilliant retrospective, and thank you. That was very well done, and that kind of gives the listening audience, if this is your first time listening or you're relatively new to the show, You can kind of just listen to Mike's little dissertation there, and you can see some of the dumb movies we covered, and the joy it's brought everybody. So I would encourage anybody to, they missed some of those, to check our back catalog. They're really a lot of fun to listen to, but we really enjoyed bringing them to you. So, like I said, we're on to season 2. We've already got several movies in the pipeline that we can't wait to get on. And if we had it our way, we record our next show right now. But we've got things to do because we're not professional podcasters. This is our hobbies. But yeah, so we want to thank everybody for listening, of course. And, we are still looking for candidates to sit in on the show. We'd like to celebrate intermittent shows with doing some top 5 lists or some other discussion shows. And we would really like to have some of our listening audience join us. So if you're curious or would like to partake in that, send us an email. We'd love to have you on for a segment, not a whole show, but maybe, 5, 10, 20-minute segment. We'd sit in and kind of have a discussion with us. We'd like to have that. So that's still out there. So get your emails to us. You can send those to nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. And if you're curious about the status of the show or what's coming up next or any kind of other discourse or dialogue, you can reach us on our Instagram page at Grumpy Nostalgia on Instagram. We'd love to have you come check us out. So, Mike, that was a lot to handle. Great first season, sir. Thank you. Great co-host. So let's not walk out without thinking about what brought us here today, Godzilla. Any final thoughts on Godzilla, Mike?
It made me want to watch the MST3K21 Gamera collection. I don't know if audience is familiar with that. There's 5 movies that MST3K has done about Gamera, the friend to children. Fantastic. This is a good palate cleanser after watching this movie.
Yeah, I would encourage, speaking of horror hosts, the guys from Mystery Science Theater really kind of fall into that genre of people that take the sting out of these bad movies and make them enjoyable and extend the life of these otherwise forgotten, sometimes poorly made movies. They always kind of get a second life to those. And again, just kind of circling back to the original point about a horror host, that's really the genius of what these guys do. You had Zachary in New York, and you had Vampira in LA, and of course Elvira. But every regional area had those. In Ohio, you had Dr. Creep and the Ghoul. And of course, there's the great Joe Bob Briggs, who's been bringing those great movies to life for years and years and years. So there's actually a great documentary called American Scary on Amazon that kind of focuses on these guys and how great they are. But so we kind of cover almost what we're watching too there, Mike, just without even knowing it. But again, that's kind of what we're doing here. We're just kind of bringing some of these movies back to life and enjoying them for and the reverence that they truly deserve, good or bad. There are things that are out there, and that should be enjoyed one way or the other. So again, we're gonna wrap it up, guys, and for a glorious end of season 1. We want to thank everybody so much for listening to us. So for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.